paperwork is probably the most easiest thing. And so what I try to do is go and speak to each superintendent or the ward or the program director and say, look, you need 4 people. And I give them a description of the people. You need a person that's, he's a leader, but he has influence on the compound. He also has a gift of administration. And so, because that president needs to have the ability to actually lead a group of people of 40. But he also has to have the ability to know about being a treasurer, a secretary, because the president should have his hands on everything inside the club. And so that person is very important. The second person is the vice president. The vice president is a person that should have those type of skills.
Go ahead.
Should have those type of skills that the same of the actual president. So I tell them, make sure we go out and look for leaders inside the institution, but also skilled people, especially a person that actually knows about any kind of entrepreneurship. And so I go look for a person that's familiar with business, that's a familiar accountant, because it makes it easier for that individual. Because if you go get somebody that never had anything to deal with money, they don't know nothing, what's going to happen? The club is not going to be successful. So you also want a person that's a secretary that's familiar with administrative work, but also able to put a class along with the club. And so when I first go in, I talk about what's needed at the prison. So every club should have a class. So we deal with that part first. The second part is dealing with the paperwork. So we have a format that we let everybody follow, so it don't be difficult. The format talks about bylaws. It talks about the purpose for the club. It talks about the financial part, what they contribute into the institution. And so I sit down, I go over that with first the program director and the superintendent or the wardens. And then after that, we actually sit down with the inmates themselves. Sit down with them and basically go through every step of the club. So the first step I talk about is knowing your bylaws, because that's very important. Knowing what the mission of that club is, and also knowing what you're gonna be teaching and what you're gonna be selling. And so those things are very important for those individuals. The last part is talking about things that are very important, because if you're running an entrepreneur, it's running a small business inside the institution, you have to talk about the money, you have to talk about bookkeeping. And so I explained to them about inventory. I explained to them how important it is to watch the inventory. I explained to them about how important it is to watch when you have stuff as you use something but you don't put it on paper. You have to put it on paper no matter what it is. If one person eats a hamburger, you need to say, look, the hamburger failed, or we did this for the hamburger. So we also talk about revenues. That means those things go out. Expenditures, those things that you have to pay for. So I explain that to them, and I also tell them about keeping a ledger. The ledgers are important because in this situation, everything we have is based on the computer. It's not actual currency. So they never see any physical money. And so it's important for them to keep a track record. So basically I help them set up where they have a ledger. They can see everything that they sold, everything they took in. And so we talk about that, the ins and outs of that. I also talk about the phase of clubs. Because I think if you hear somebody tell you that, look, this has happened before. Clubs have failed in the ways they failed. One, greed. The biggest issue that's happened, every club I know about has failed because of greed. The second thing is envy. And so most clubs inside the institution, they fail because that club or that president or that treasurer, they get into it, they have a political fight against each other, they pull against each other. So we talk about envy and how to remove it. The only way to remove it is that y'all all be unified. So we talk about unity. Now, unity doesn't mean we all look alike, right? So I can put on the same uniform, that means we unified. And so we talk about unity, building a brotherhood. And so talk about that brotherhood, because that's the most important thing. We're trying to combat a community that's full of gangs. And so I know the commissioner always talks about breaking the gang cycle. Well, the only way you can do that is build another community, that's what we're doing through the club. So we're doing each club by 40 people. So that club has an identity. So like we just talked about earlier about the Toastmasters. Toastmaster identity, they are targeting people to teach them how to do public speaking, right? That's the class connected in them. And so they group of people probably gonna be people that's already in the education field. Life builder, they targeting people who are basically about to go home, and which they catch. They teach curriculum such as spiritual growth. They teach, which our GAIN curriculum, our GAIN initiative. So they target people that's most likely about to go home and about to re-enter society. So they focus on re-entry, and so that's they target people. So they got, even though they have 40 members, they target people, basically everybody from 10 years and under. And so you teach them about the people they're actually addressing. And so you teach them about community, teach them about fellowship. Those things should happen before you actually establish the club. Now, once the club is established, you do more training on the day-by-day operations of a club, because the club is not only a team building concept, but it's actually teaching them a trade and how to go to work. Because everybody that's actually in the club, they got to put in some type of work, and so that's going to teach them how to first get up and go in the morning. And some people have never did that. And it's almost like teaching them how to go to work that morning. You teaching them, get up. This is what the club has to do. So you also educate them, because I'm gonna say it again, every club has a class that goes along with it. And you also teach them, again, entrepreneurship, to own their own business, how to actually structure a board. And so that's some of the things that we go over dealing with the club.